Coming to get you, Bobber.
So 2020 is well and truly over, and you've probably noticed from the title that I've only got a top 5 horror movies of the year. I don't even think, looking at my list, I haven't even seen 10 horror movies from 2020, so I couldn't do a top 10 because they would all be in it. There are a few horror movies that I've missed out for good reason, and my top 5 doesn't consist of 5 amazing horror movies either, because again, like I said, I haven't seen that many horror movies. I haven't seen that many movies throughout 2020 because of the obvious issues, so that's why I've squeezed it into a top 5 today. And number 5 is The Rental. Now, I wasn't expecting much from this because there wasn't a lot of advertisement before this movie came out, and I thought it was quite a really good sleeper hit, and I think it's because I wasn't expecting much. Like I said, the acting performances were really good in this, and I think it wasn't much of a twist at the end, but I really did like the end of the movie. I didn't see the movie going in the direction that it did, but I think it was very well edited, very well acted, and very well shot. And then number 4 is The Babysitter, Killer Queen. Now, it's strange because this is probably my most disappointing horror movie of 2020, yet it still made the list, and the reason for that is because it's still a good movie. It's still well made. It still had that feeling of the first movie that came out a few years earlier. The first movie is a lot better, of course. This one was okay. It gave us a lot of things that we saw before, so it was a little bit repetitive. The only difference is it wasn't set in the house anymore. It was set on an island, and that's about it. So that's probably why it was more disappointing for me. But overall, it was still a solid horror movie, but not what I was hoping for. And then number 3 is The Hunt. Now, I really enjoyed this one. This was a really good horror movie. Less of a horror movie, more of an action style horror movie, but horror nonetheless. And I watched this a couple of times after I'd done my initial review for the film, and I still really like it. The only issue that I had with it overall was the last half of the movie, or the last third of the movie. It just didn't really mesh well with the first half and maybe the middle of the film. I think at the very start, when we don't know what's happening and they're getting lumped together, it's very exciting. Then when we get halfway through the film, they explain a few things and we're like, right, okay. I didn't really want to know that because it takes away the mystery of what I was enjoying about the first half of the movie, or the first part. And then when you get to the end, as enjoyable as it is, I still didn't get that payoff that I was looking for. But when I review the film as a whole, then it's still a really enjoyable movie. Obviously, again, it's not an amazing film, but still one of the best horrors of the year. And then number 2 is Freaky. This is probably one of the newest releases on my list, and I really enjoyed this film. I think this one and number 1 on my list are the 2 horror movies that I really enjoyed and I thought were great. This being number 2. I only done a review for this a few weeks ago, but it still lives fresh in my mind, and I still really enjoyed it. I think it had that Happy Death Day feeling to it, but at the same time it was still quite serious, and it was still a horror movie as well. I did mention before, it felt like Halloween 2018 mixed in with Happy Death Day, and I love both those movies, so if you mix them together, it could be a recipe for disaster. However, the director done it really well, and he gave us one of the best horror movies of the year. And at number 1 is The Invisible Man. Now, this movie, I haven't seen this movie since the cinema, and this was the very last movie that I saw in a proper cinema before shit hit the fan. And again, it's still a movie, I've only seen it once, so it still lives fresh in my mind as well. And the reason for that is because it was an incredible film. Not only was it a great horror movie, it was a great suspense action movie. There's a lot of times in this film where not a lot is happening, but you get that build up of tension, and that tension has a lot of payoff. Lee Winnell, the director of this film, knows how to build that tension, just like his friend James Wan does in the Conjuring universe. He's taken those elements, I don't know if he's copying them or not, but he's taken those style of elements, bring it into a horror movie like The Invisible Man. I'd love to see Lee Winnell doing more horror movies in the future, because what he'd done with this Invisible Man movie was incredible. I wasn't expecting much at all. Looking at the trailers, I thought, okay, it looks good, but it also looks like your run-of-the-mill horror movie. But it wasn't. It had some run-of-the-mill moments and a run-of-the-mill storyline, but he used that storyline, he used the elements of that to our surprise, because he was giving us something that we'd seen time and time again, but he's putting that Lee Winnell twist on it, and it was great. Great performances, great set design, great suspense. What can I say about this? This was the best horror movie of 2020. And that's it, guys. I'm really sorry I couldn't do a top 10. There was some really bad horror movies that I watched this year. on the list, I can't even be bothered to mention them, but there was a lot of bad horror movies. There was some really good ones, but overall I think there's only been really two really good, if not great, horror movies, and that is Freaky and The Invisible Man. That's the only two that I can write home about all year. It's not the filmmakers' faults, because some of the horror movies that were supposed to come out this year have obviously been delayed. So had they came out in 2020, we might have had a better list, we might have had a bigger list, but until then we're not going to know that because of what happened. So those movies are getting delayed to 2021. So this is all we have to work with this year. There are quite a few horror movies that I haven't seen, guys. For example, Run, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen The Possessor. There's some films that are not on the list because not that I didn't like them, it's the fact that I just haven't seen them and I just haven't had time. But as always, guys, leave your comments down below. Let me know your top 5 horror movies of 2020. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for watching again. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.